Giant Brian, one of the world's most notorious criminals. Sentenced to 4 years for stealing a lifetime supply of Freddo frogs and a packet of Sour Patch Kids from his local Tesco Express. Having previously been locked up in Center Perks Prison, he escaped by tunneling through the wall with a bunch of plastic forks. However, whilst rejoicing in his momentary freedom, he was tracked down by a camera crew filming a prison documentary, and, after a few days on the run, involving many visits to Tesco, the police finally caught up to him, and he was taken back into custody. Now, he found himself in much more intimidating surroundings. Rattlesnake Springs, a prison situated in the scorching hot desert of skeg-ness. Repeat offenders were sent here to suffer in the unrelenting heat, but for Giant Brian, even heat stroke and mild sunburn couldn't bring him down. No, he was going to escape. Day 1. Hip 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 hip. Brian woke up with the taste of sand in his mouth. He made his way across the arid prison yard and lined up for roll call. The first thing he noticed was just how few inmates this prison held. These really must be the toughest of tough criminals. He looked around to see infamous names such as Kidnapper Kenneth, the Number Taker, Monsieur Plop, and a woman simply called the Typhoon, who came from a distant kingdom known as Dragon City. Dragon City is a... oh god. This video is sponsored by Dragon City. Dragon City is a free-to-play mobile game, in which you can collect over 1,000 different species of dragon. Whoa, that's more dragons than you could shake a stick at, am I right, gamers? In Dragon City, you can grow food, earn gold, find gems, and even breed dragons together to make baby dragons. But dude, how do dragons have babies? Oh boy. Well, when a mummy dragon and a daddy dragon love each other very much, take part in player versus player battles and train your dragon to be so powerful it demolishes every living being in its wake. Or join an alliance so you can battle alongside your friends. Aww. Not sold on Dragon City yet? Well, here's a real humdinger for you, everyone. Some of the dragons look like YouTubers. Darman, Dream, the Sidemen, and Mr. Beast has a dragon. What? You can download Dragon City now by visiting the link in the description, or by scanning the QR code on screen to get your special free starter pack of 15,000 food, 30,000 gold, and a rare zombie flame dragon. Thank you very much to Dragon City for sponsoring this video, and as they say in Dragon City, if you don't like dragons, well, you can drag off for all I care. Aside from now wanting to download an app, Brian was well and truly intimidated. He didn't want to stick around these folks for too long, and the first order of business was to find himself a weapon. Thankfully, this didn't take long, as, with a quick trip to the kitchen, he found exactly what he was looking for. The cutlery drawer. With his very own giant plastic knife in hand, Brian set out to survey the rest of the prison grounds and find some way to escape this arid hellhole. To begin with, Brian busted into each prison cell and began to raid everyone's desks. If he was going to get out of here, he needed all of the random garbage he could get his hands on. As he was doing this though, a guard spotted him and began to chase him, and oh god, he was being shot! He was being shot already! He looked around desperately for cover, but there was barely anywhere to hide apart from the cells he had just come from. Thank God his plastic knife-based combat was extra effective in small spaces, as he was used to fighting people in the Tesco's confectionery aisle. He was able to get the better of Officer 69 and alleviate the immediate danger. It was thanks to this chase and scuffle that Brian now realized something. The vast majority of Rattlesnake Springs Prison was outside. They exercised outside, showered outside, even the prison cells were partially open to the air. This whole compound was a sniper's dream. It was going to be very difficult to do anything here in secret. For now, Brian decided to avoid further suspicion by pretending to be asleep. This didn't work, however, as moments later he was mauled by a guard dog, shot unconscious, and put into solitary confinement. Whilst peeling potatoes, Brian bemoaned his rotten luck. He needed to find some place only he knew about. somewhere hidden away. And once he was free from solitary, he set out in search of just that. The first place he thought to search was, oh god, what's that? What's going on now? They have metal detectors as well. What the heck is this place? Brian was swarmed immediately by officers on all sides. What followed was a chase scene of epic proportions. 4 policemen were hot on his tail, and he ran around the prison yard for what felt like hours. However, just as he was beginning to break away, he stumbled across a mysterious but promising-looking room. It was only small, but perhaps this could be Brian's new base of operations. Oh wait, no, here they come again. Run, Brian, run! Brian was then shot unconscious and taken to hospital. Once the heat had finally died down, Brian headed back to the small room. It was the perfect location, but it was too risky to use this place right now, especially after being caught here moments ago. So the search for a new base of operations continued, long after curfew and into the night. Fortunately, staying out late had paid off, as Brian came upon an even more encouraging sight. A room with a ladder in the middle. This could only mean one thing: a tunnel out of this place. Brian couldn't believe his luck. All he had to do was prise open this door and, oh goodness, there was guards everywhere. He couldn't be spotted. After doubling around the building, Brian lifted the door again, and this time he wrenched it open, but oh, there was one major problem. How could Brian get through the door if he was the one holding it open? It seemed this room wasn't going to work after all, and Brian headed back to bed disappointed. Or he would have done had he not been spotted on the way back and shot by another sniper. Oh well, Brian, have fun in solitary confinement. Brian had had enough of this. He was fed up of being shot, and this time he would find a way out. Oh, some stairs. Brian didn't realize this prison had an upstairs. Wow, this was perfect. He could see across the whole compound from up here, and he went around scouting out everything from above until... Wait a minute, was that... No way! He could see outside of the prison. The path to freedom was right there in front of him, and, picking up a metal pole from a room off to the side, he ran back out and began to break down the wall. Ooh, careful now, Brian, don't get caught. But once the coast was clear again, Brian continued to chip away at the concrete. He was nearly there, just moments away from another masterful escape. The wall crumbled before him, and he sprang down onto the sand below. Brian sprinted into the desert as fast as his tiny pixel legs would carry him. One lone officer had spotted him and was hot on his heels, but thankfully, Brian managed to find a wild horse off screen, and the officer had to make a retreat. Unfortunately though, Brian didn't really know how to ride a horse, and although we can't be too sure what happened, somehow, when Brian reappeared for a third time, the tables had turned. So Brian was apprehended, and he was arrested once more. Well, damn it. It seems that simply breaking through a wall in broad daylight wasn't exactly the best plan. If he was gonna sneak out of here, Brian would need to find some way less conspicuous. How about going down? The old-fashioned diggy hole method, a staple of prison breaks across the world, and Brian knew just where to do it. He ran once more straight to the kitchen's cutlery drawer, and this time gathered up as many plastic spoons as possible. Then he discreetly entered the small room he'd found earlier, and began to dig and dig and dig. This would be the greatest tunnel this prison had ever witnessed. But oh my goodness, Brian, this is gonna take forever. Maybe digging a whole tunnel with just plastic spoons would be a little too slow. And, in pursuit of a more industrial method of excavation, Brian headed to the library and began to read books such as How to Make a Bottomless Pit, Archaeology 101, and the History of Dwarves. Through this, he learned how to make his very own pickaxe. And, after trading a crowbar from an inmate named Susan Fraud, he combined it with some pieces of wood and a metric ton of duct tape. Now, Brian was ready to dig properly. That night, whilst roll call was going on, Brian headed back to the small room. Unfortunately, roll call happened right next to the room he was digging in, so he did have to walk past the entire prison staff with his pickaxe in hand. But luckily, somehow, nobody noticed. His new pickaxe was so efficient that, with only a few swings, he had busted a hole in the floor. Brian jumped in, and, to his utter surprise, he found there was already a huge tunnel just a few feet away. This prison must have been built on an old mine shaft. It was incredible news. Brian barely needed to dig at all. He tunneled his way as fast as possible towards the shaft, but there was some boxes in the way that he couldn't quite get past. Brian chose to dig around, but by the time he was through, his pickaxe had broken. So he had to go all the way back and do the whole process again, craft another pickaxe, walk very obviously back to his tunnel. To be honest, someone should have spotted him by now. But once he was back down in the cave, it was showtime. Brian tunneled his way through the walls of the mineshaft until he saw light coming from what seemed to be an exit. This was it! Freedom was just this way! He ran out into the desert once more, but as it turns out, if you walk across a prison yard holding a pickaxe enough times, the guards will probably figure out that you're escaping via the mineshaft. In desperation, Brian once again turned to the local population of wild horses, but still not knowing how to ride, he fell off his horse again and was apprehended. Well, that was it then. It was hopeless. Who knew that equestrian would be such an important skill for breaking out of prison? Brian was out of options. He had tried escaping downwards, but with no success. He had tried escaping upwards, but to no avail. Maybe he really was going to be stuck here forever. Whoa, wait. Hang on. That was another set of stairs. How many floors did this prison have? As it turned out, there was a whole section of the prison Brian hadn't even set foot in. It seems that he had lost faith too soon. Brian had not yet failed in any escape attempt, and he was sure he would find a route somewhere. The only problem now was that this new section was blocked off by a red staff door. The fools! Didn't they know there was no door that Giant Brian couldn't open? Well, apart from that one earlier, but that doesn't count. Brian had broken into Tesco so many times that to him, a mere staff door was nothing but child's play. He used some talcum powder and a tube of toothpaste to make a moldable putty. Then he melted a hair comb using a stolen lighter, and he now had all the components he needed to make a fake key. All he had to do was get his hands on the real red key for a few seconds, and he would have access to every red door in the prison. The question was, where was the red key, and who was carrying it? Could it be Officer Wednesday? Maybe Officer Vandalism? But neither of those seemed high profile enough. No, there was one officer Giant Brian had in mind. The chief guard of Rattlesnake Springs, Officer Tuesday. Brian had to wait until she was done conducting roll call, but afterwards he followed her until she was all alone, and with a quick 1-2 he began to beat her up. Oh dear though, it seemed Brian had been a bit too keen. Officer Merlin had overheard the sounds of their scuffle, and he rushed in to help. Brian was able to knock down Officer Tuesday, but seeing as he didn't have his giant plastic knife on him, 2 officers was too much to handle, and he as well was knocked unconscious. Fortunately, they had chosen to hospitalize both Brian and Officer Tuesday in adjacent beds. And all Brian had to do was wait outside the hospital and beat up Officer Tuesday before she could recover. Just as suspected, she was carrying the red key. Brian had to be fast. He thrust the key into the mold, then threw it on the ground and made a run for it. The prison went into immediate lockdown, but Brian avoided suspicion by hiding in a nearby filing cabinet. Once the heat had died down, he returned to his cell, and he now had a red key of his very own. There was no time to lose. Brian snuck back upstairs to the ominous red door, unlocked it, and began to explore the rest of the prison. There was so much back here. It was a maze of corridors, and Brian didn't know where to look first. Eventually, he came upon yet another set of stairs, and then, and you won't believe this, another set of stairs. The staircase opened out at the top of a tall tower, and what Brian found up here made his heart skip a beat. A long rope tied to a pole, and a sign which said escape. I need to craft a complete crossbow, thought Brian completely spontaneously, which does seem like a bit of a weirdly specific thought to have with no context, almost as if this were a scripted part of a video game or something, but trust me guys, Brian thinks in the fourth dimension, he just knows these things. And, diving into action for what he hoped would be the final time, Brian skipped all the way back to his cell, made himself his very own crossbow out of various scraps of wood, and then zoomed his way back through the red door and up the numerous flights of stairs. He strung the rope up across the rooftops, and then, using his crossbow as a handle, he ziplined his way through the air and down into the conveniently placed prison stables below. He jumped on a horse for the third time, buckled his heels, and rode out towards his inevitable freedom. Unfortunately, Brian still didn't know how to ride a horse, and so the horse just kind of kept going, and oh god, where was this horse taking him? Where was he going to end up? No, Brian, come back, no! Thanks once again to Dragon City for sponsoring this video. You can download Dragon City now by visiting the link in the description.